It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It's Feedback Friday. I know we're all tired. I know we're all punchy. I'll try to make this video as entertaining as we possibly can. But I mean, let's face it. There's a big thing that happened this week. That can't be ignored. It's sort of an international trauma because of it. Which is interesting because one of the things is Wellness Wednesday seems like a good idea based on the feedback. Okay, there's feedback from this week. I will get to whatever that was in the U.S. Capitol. I want to do a little bit of wrap up from the week for your actual comments because I promised some people I would. So if you like this kind of, and it will all sort of tie together in an overall theme. So this is not a waste of time. Please, as much as you can, watch with caveats. I'll come to this. If you like this sort of thing, help support this channel. Become a Patreon. Become a patron. Patreon.com/ANK. Okay. It was sort of real simple. We had a bit of a discussion about the Wonder Woman movie. We all, like, the general consensus was that the outrage about Sense of Cyberpunk story was ridiculous. You know, I've played through, I'm still playing the game, but I've played enough of the game to go, no, this is a bunch of people who didn't play the game, judging the game on one image. But I got a private message, and I want to reward this kind of feedback because it was a very mutually affirming conversation. And this is why I'm saying it ties into the thing that happened this week, right? A woman who's trans, a trans woman, approached me in Twitter DMs. And she could have chosen to come at me hard and voice her understandable frustration about an element of the Sense story. And I'm being deliberately vague because I have to do a trigger warning before I talk about this, and I suck at this. Okay. If you are extremely bothered by conversations about transphobia, I will do this now. And I will wave my arms again when I've moved on to the thing that happened this week, so you don't have to watch this, okay? But what she asked me is if I was aware of the turf connection to the whole, brigade on Top Hat Games. And I told her, yeah, I actually spent some time going through to see if those accounts were actually real. And I noticed a lot of references to the J.K. Rowling saga and then Magdalene Burns, rest in peace, I believe. Who one group calls her a brave, a stunning and brave radical feminist. She died of cancer. Dying of cancer doesn't make you more right. Just full disclosure. But to many in the trans community, she was transphobic and she perpetuated sex worker stigma. I don't want to get into who's right or wrong on that. The whole point is when you see that name in somebody's Twitter bio, you know you are in Turfania, right? And those are the sorts of people that actually self-identify as TERFs because they identify with the radical feminism part, right? And I said to this lovely woman, she handled it so well, that I saw it. I confirm that I saw what she saw, which is, this is a weird cross-section. Like, why are there so many anti-trans activists dogpiling a game where a woman happens to be, okay, when you actually play the game, you stop noticing how big May's boobs are because her she's thick, right? Like her butt way dwarfs her boobs. She's like J-Lo and Beyonce proportioned, right? Like you don't even notice anymore. Like it doesn't make sense, right? Like why would now it's the radical feminism part, right? The sex negative radical feminism. But what I said to her is that I saw it, I thought about commenting on it, but I didn't want to call attention to that because I was afraid that pointing out transphobia might trigger someone, because just putting myself in somebody's shoes, I know there's certain things going on in the world I can't think about too hard unless I like have time to feel shitty about it. So, I don't want someone coming here on something else and having their day wrecked because they're reminded of the fact that there are people out there that just hate their guts for things they can't control, right? And she said, I didn't think about that. Like that didn't cross my mind for a second. Thank you for considering us. And then she actually started apologizing for being too accusatory. I'm like, no, you were great. And I said to her, would you like me to say something about it? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, okay. All she wanted was for someone to validate that was real and they saw it too. And yeah, that's effed up. What's up with that, right? And this is an example of the power of one person with kindness in their heart and a well-reasoned argument and a willingness to ask questions and come at it gently instead of roar is more effective at changing somebody's mind than an entire Twitter mob or a real life mob. And I really think that's so, okay, welcome back. That is so relevant because it's like the complete antithesis, right, of what happened in Washington, D.C. There is no way to sum up, and let's face it, everybody knows what happened in Washington. Like everybody like in Canada, we were like, in Australia, we was like, in one guy I know is originally from Ecuador goes, wake me up when you've got 3 presidents, which, okay, fair perspective. I am very blessed to have an incredibly diverse group of friends. It's interesting the number of people I know from Mexico and Latin America who have basically, leading up to this has been, why hasn't America rioted yet? And it was like, then the Black Lives Matter thing happened. It was like, oh, okay, there we go. But that's the perspective from Latin America. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just different parts of the world have different perspectives, right? And the unfortunate thing, at least in the circles I travel in, the question was not whether there was going to be something going down on Wednesday, January 6th, yeah. Not whether something would happen or not, but how bad it would be. That was the discussion. The night before, my husband asked me, like Tuesday night, do you think something's going to happen tomorrow? I'm like, oh yeah, guaranteed something's going to happen tomorrow. We knew it was coming, right? And that was not because I had any insider information, right? It was just because I know my history, and this is how populist waves in history go. Every time. when populism hits a certain critical mass. And that, I hate being right in this point. You know, I said, God, it was during the Democratic primary that I was saying they got to cut out the populism, because populist rhetoric talking about revolutions and stuff like that, it never ends well. It ends in blood. Cut that crap out. I took a lot of shit for that from Bernie Sanders supporters at the time. But part of the reason you shall not pass at that moment is, left-wing populism in America right now is like way dwarfed by what's going on the right, just because of who was in power and so on and forth. Now, that is an oversimplification. Yes, we do not have time to get into the mess of who is pulling the strings of this populism and who ultimately benefits from this upheaval. We could talk for 6 hours on that and not even scratch the surface, okay? I want to find a way to validate every sane perspective on this, right? And that's difficult because the minute I spend a bit of attention on one group, the other group gets upset. So hear me out here, okay? There was a guy on Twitter that came at me hard, trying to, get all inflammatory, throwing the Martin Luther King quote at me, riots are the language of the unheard. Just based on how I respect, he thought I gotta get her, right? And he took that shot and he threw away a shot. Hamilton, I am not giving it. Dude, you threw away your shot. If you're watching this right now, he says he watches my content, which is why he backed off. Because I actually tweeted him and said, I was about to tell you had a point. But if you don't want to continue, that's fine. Because I checked him on the inflammatory approach. And I'm like, dude, be cool. But he left before I could tell him he has a point. But that's not all Martin Luther King said on that point. That quote is taken out of context, right? Because Martin Luther King Jr. did say that. He also said that he supported nonviolent tactics. I mean, that's what he's known for. And expressed disapproval for riots. He called them socially destructive. Yes, you can have both. You can't. What he actually said was, here it is, okay? And please listen to this, no matter what side you are on. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? Now, the next line in this speech contains a word that I am no longer allowed to use as a white person, even reading in quotes, because it sounds too much like another word. But what he started talking about is the plight of the poor. So skip over. I won't read the offending word. I'll read the rest of it. It has failed to hear that the plight of the blank poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not yet been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of blank, the opposite of the word I can't say, society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. Did you hear that? In a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of decay. Now, that is not a literal summer. It's it's a metaphor as well as being literal in that case. But this is an example of he's not condoning and he's not supporting, he's explaining. And he was right then. And I think the unfortunate question that nobody wants to answer, a lot of people did not want to answer the question, what isn't America hearing when, you know, Ferguson went down and the LA riots after the Rodney King thing happened, and, you know, the protests in Wisconsin went down. And I mean, it's been we cannot treat what happened in Washington on Wednesday and what happened with the BLM stuff. I'm not saying, I am drawing a clear distinction between protesters and rioters in both. People who, you know, went to that Trump rally and then went home, or people who just marched to the Capitol and didn't go inside. Fair game. That's your right, right? Plenty of people stood outside, did not go inside. They exercised their freedom of expression. They did not. And that is the same as what went on over the summer with BLM. And I'm not even willing to say that it was actual BLM protesters that were doing the rioting at night. Jury's out on that. But riots did happen. Businesses did get looted. And I think it is missing the point to try to compare the looting of a small business and destruction of property in the Capitol building. They are different types of tragedies. In some ways, one can argue that for that small business owner, that harmed them more than, you know, busting the glass door to Nancy Pelosi's office. She was shaken up. No member of Congress, no member of the Senate, you know, no member of the executive branch. Nobody was hurt. They were scared, probably, but nobody was hurt. The only people who got hurt, a cop got punched in the face. There were a bunch of medical emergencies, and one of the women apparently, I don't want to get into details because I'm not sure, I wasn't there, but one woman got shot. For that woman's family, that's awful, right? For the cop that got punched, that's awful. The glass door will get fixed. It'll come out of people's taxes, unfortunately. That's one of the great ironies of this whole thing. The issue with what happened on Wednesday is that it ended the US's tradition of a peaceful transfer of power. And that is what you cannot compare. And that's what I find so odd about the whole thing. That on the one hand, I intellectually go, you know, words like sedition and all that stuff get thrown around. Like, this was not a peaceful transfer of power. But then, like, that's logical. I'm like, no, don't be a shitlord about this. Like, this is serious. But, like, in my gut, my reaction, like, my emotional reaction to the whole thing was, my God, it's a Twitter fight in meat space. Like, a whole bunch of people get hurt. Things go crazy. Everybody who sees it gets freaked out. A bunch of stuff get wrecked. Some people get really badly hurt. But ultimately, it's futile. Ultimately, it changes nothing. Ultimately, all it did was make a lot of noise, break a lot of stuff, and delay. And that's what makes this whole thing so hard to compare to anything else is in our polarized society, we are not good at holding the abstraction of seriousness, the abstraction of sedition, and the abstraction of absurdity at the same time. Like, we're not good at recognizing, no, you can connect these abstractions. You can link them logically. They're not just sitting there floating there doing nothing, right? I know I'm sounding like a broken clock podcast right now, but in this case, we have to. In this case, we have to recognize the legitimate level of absurdity that was, I mean, the stuff that was going through my head while I was watching it. It's like, I couldn't look away. And there were people, Trump supporters in Toronto, like, driving around with Trump flags. Like, it even made it up here. Driving by ritzy malls, which I went, oh man, somebody's kid is just acting out. That's going to be an uncomfortable conversation at home when he gets home and finds out, it's like, or she gets home and finds out what the heck happened. But, like, we have to do both. And we, as I was saying, like, everything's going down, and I started, like, I couldn't help it. The jokes just started coming. Like, it became like a farmer's insurance commercial, like, Hall of Claims, jump the fence for Pence, seen it, covered it, we are farmers, bump, 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 right? Like, I was like, when is somebody gonna show up and yell live from New York, it's Saturday night, right? Like, wow, this is like Les Mis and Phantom, and, you know, campaign funds are for porn stars, a la Avenue Q. Like, it was just, the disbelief resulted in some very, very dark humor. I mean, I've never seen Mitch McConnell so animated in a really long time. I've never seen Chuck Schumer animated as much as a really long time. Even Mike Pence seemed to have a feeling. And Mitt Romney, damn, man, he was on fire. I was like, that's like Universe 616 Mitt Romney, like right there. That is Mitt Romney with a mohawk and no feet, married to Wolverine right there. And that's a comic book reference for those of you who don't get it. In an alternate universe, Storm has a mohawk in the future and is married to Wolverine. Okay. But like that was nice to see, right? Like, it was nice to see. Everybody likely saw a politician that they do not agree with. If you watch the proceedings on Wednesday night, everybody likely saw a politician that they did not agree with politically seem like a human being for a change. And that was great, right? That was really good. Like, just to see a little bit of color in Mitch McConnell's face was nice, personally, right? I mean, I think Mitt won the night, but that's an awful way to talk about it, right? This isn't a joke. But, and yet, it was, the whole thing was a bad joke. But we can't let the bad joke take us away from that language of the unheard element, right? And the thing about the culture war, the thing I have been watching and documenting from at least 2012 until now, is that the louder everyone screams, the less anybody seems to feel heard. Try listening to anybody when you're screaming. It's kind of hard, right? Like, you can't hear them over your own noise. And I think it misses the point to point fingers at one side or the other. And this is not both sidesism, because the two sides in this are the people that engaged and inflamed the culture war and the people who combated it or wanted no part of it. This is not a very fine people on both sides thing. This is just setting the conditions of the binary differently. You know? people who disagree with cancel culture and stuff like this, and people who are for it. And that crosses the left-right political divide. That stuff doesn't work. Cancel culture doesn't work. Unending protests don't work. Riots and mobs and intimidation definitely do not work. I could say some very un-PC things about how I thought the Trump movement was actually starting to win the culture war after the defund the police thing just totally landed like a lead balloon. Just terrible messaging. Lost seats in Congress. Some people lost their Senate seats who shouldn't have. Just big turkey stink bomb lead balloon, right? It's jump ball now. Trump just erased all those gains. But that's cynical, right? That's the political football. That's horse race political reporting. That isn't looking at the structural problems of who is feeling unheard. And who is feeling unheard right now? Look in the mirror. Every single one of us, I guarantee, is feeling unheard right now. Every single one. That voice of the unheard is your own voice in some way. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, political atheist, up here, NDP, Green Party, CPC, because they're liberal, whatever. Everyone who isn't directly connected to power, meaning like a CEO of a major company, like a multimillionaire or a politician right now. The voice of the unheard is me. The voice of the unheard is you. Now, I can't even say that because I have a platform here, right? But even I've caught myself going, nobody's listening. And I'm like, stupid. Yeah, people listen to you every day. But that feeling is something I can use to connect to a lot of you watching right now who can honestly say, I don't feel heard. And I'm going to tell you, one of the things you'll notice my channel has drifted to more and more and more, hence Feedback Friday, hence like over Christmas, just reading comments was an effort to just make people feel heard, like one comment at a time, right? Like I was able to make that lady I talked to feel heard this week, right? On Twitch, people had the courage to admit that they thought society thought they were worthless. And these were longtime Twitch viewers. And I could go, you're not worthless. And this is why. This one guy, bless him, he's so sweet. But I said, dude, people called you worthless. You show up here and you bring like these like out there left-wing political opinions. And I bust your balls like every single time, and you don't get discouraged. You come back and you try me again, and I bust your balls again. And I said, we're creating a dialogue for all these people, and everybody learns something. And not only is it good content, but it's an exchange of ideas. I said, anybody who tells you you're worthless with me around is gonna have to deal with me, because that's some bullshit. But obviously, this is the kind of thing that every single person needs to hear. I really think that there is so much noise. There's so much information. There's so much data. There are so many Facebook posts and tweets and everything like that. People no longer realize how much you're touching another person's life. And like that woman that approached me in DM and just asked a question instead of just attacked. I'm sure she feels voiceless too, which is why she was asking me to say something. But I heard her. And I, metaphorically saw her. She's real and she matters. And you're real and you matter. And that person you can't stand on the internet, they're real and they matter too. And that person who blocked you last week, like, okay, maybe some of them are trolls and they're bots, but you know what I mean? Like, rioting is the voice of the unheard, yes. But there are so many other people who don't feel heard. We gotta stop trying to place blame and start trying to listen to the people who can stop screaming loud enough for us to make sense of what they're saying. And I have more respect for a woman who comes and asks me a question instead of attacking me, even though it's a very tender thing. I mean, oh my God, issues of identity. Oh my God, keeping chill. And I'm sure she wasn't chill. She said she was like anxietying all over the place, but she was so kind. People like that are braver than people who are like looting and rioting and even protesting. A person who says, I think society doesn't care about me because my dad says I don't earn money, or my stepdad says I don't earn money, and so I can't speak, I don't know. People like that, to me, are braver than people who need crowds of thousands to say something. And the only way forward is to make those individual whispers in the noise matter, to prioritize them in our content, to prioritize them in our decisions, to prioritize them in who we choose to allow to persuade our thinking. There are no shortcuts. Because the truth is, I mean, all this political stuff, talk about social constructs, right? Like, if a border moves tomorrow, does the land under your feet cease to exist? No, it's still there. The meaning we assign to it is different, but that land is still there. That's objective reality, right? This crap's got to stop. And we can't stop it at a macro level. We can't stop protests. We can't stop riots. We can't stop bullshit gridlock in government. But look back to the 60s, right? Look back. And this is what politicians need to hear. You know, in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. That is the message politicians have to start hearing. Hopefully they will, but we can't do anything about that. All we can do is support each other. So please, if you've watched to the end here, good for you. You have longevity. You have stamina, high con score, high constitution score. Tell someone they matter, and tell them why. Because the tangible details are the difference between a platitude and a meaningful comment, right? If somebody said something that made you laugh and made you feel better, if you think someone was kind and they didn't have to be, if somebody made you think, if somebody made you reconsider, if someone even did something that allowed you to affirm a belief, tell them. You're going to feel foolish because this is not a convention that we're comfortable with. Positivity is a risk. But let me tell you, I've seen so many examples over the last couple days that it just means so much. A single positive whisper has more power than 10 people screaming negatives. Because it gives people a sense of what they can crawl towards instead of run away from, right? And that's where I'm going to leave this. I hope this helps somebody. I hope it did. Again, you matter. And if I can do anything to help you feel less unheard, please let me know. Wellness Wednesdays are the first start, are the first step. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.